Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 238, Lysis 217e to 218a. The presence of white dye makes hair appear white, although the hair isn't actually white, according to this argument, while old age makes hair really white. So these are the two sorts of presence of whiteness. The presence of one sort of whiteness makes something appear white while it isn't white, while the other sort of presence of whiteness makes the thing actually white. Now we replace white with bad, and we find that there are two sorts of presence of bad as well. In the presence of bad of one sort, the thing in which the bad exists becomes eager to remove that bad and will then look for and desire the good. And now we come to the second presence of bad. Hede kakon poiusa apostere autotes te pusumias hama kaites filias tu agathu, ugar etiestin ute kakon ut agathon ala kakon, philon de agatho kakon uk en, ugar un. I'm going to have to add a few words which are understood to be there. They were in the previous clause, but now they no longer need to be present. This is usual in Greek. The presence of bad, that's understood, making something bad will deprive that something of the desire and the friendship of the good. For it is no longer neither bad nor good, but bad. And bad isn't friendly to good. No, it isn't. The boy, presumably Menexenus, remembers that the bad isn't a friend of the good and is able to answer confidently. He doesn't worry too much about how something can have bad in it and yet not be bad, just as a body with disease in it still isn't a diseased body, according to a previous argument. The boys clearly need some waking up, so Socrates makes the argument even more absurd. But it follows from the argument so far. Dia tauta de faemenan, kai tus ede sophus meceti philosophen, ete theoi ete anthropoies in hutoi, ud aucenus philosophentus hutos agnoion echontas, hoste cacus enai, cacongar kai amathe udena philosophen. For these reasons, we would say also that the sophoi, let's call them the wise, even though they're really experts at life in this instance, we would say the wise no longer philosophize, whether they're gods or humans. We would also say that those don't philosophize who have ignorance in such a way that they are bad. For we would say that no one philosophizes who is bad and uneducated. Lepon taide hoi echontes mento kakon tuto ten agnoian, me pode hupautuontes agnomones me de amethes, al eti hegumenoi me edenai ha me isasin. There remain those who have this bad thing, ignorance, but they're not yet senseless and uneducated, but still thinking that they don't know what they don't know. So there are two sorts of badness, two sorts of ignorance. There are those who think that they know what they don't know, but there are others who are still not completely overtaken by ignorance, who are aware that there are things that they don't know, so that they know that they don't know. And this echoes something Plato's Socrates says in Apology, but Apollo seems to have claimed that Socrates is the wisest of all humans because he doesn't think that he knows what he doesn't know. This claim has been perverted in modern t-shirts to say, all that I know is that I know nothing. Socrates does not say that. He never said that. He does claim now and then in dialogues that there's a particular field of knowledge which he doesn't understand, but that is not the same as saying that wisdom is not knowing anything. Wisdom is not thinking that you know what you don't know. This still allows you to know some things and to know that you know them. According to Socrates' portrayal of ignorance, we begin by being neither good nor bad and having bad enter us, which is ignorance, but it still hasn't taken control of us completely, and only then does it take control and we begin to think that we know what we don't know. That is absolute ignorance. This, in fact, is the wrong way round. We begin by thinking that we know what we don't know, and it's only when we receive a shock to the system, when somehow we are confronted by our own self-contradictions, that we realize that possibly we don't actually know what we don't know. And this is where Socrates comes in, usually. He's the one who tries to make people realize that they are actually ignorant of things which they thought that they knew. The Socratic method, if there actually is one, isn't what we are normally told in secondary literature, but the simple operation of confronting interlocutors with their own internal contradictions. This is why Socrates can say whatever he likes. He doesn't actually express his own opinion. He's always bringing up the opinions held by his interlocutor, but he brings them up in such a way that at various points in the conversation we find a ridiculous contradiction. I say ridiculous because if there's anything people find disturbing, it is the idea that they might be laughed at. This is the whole key to heuristics. You win a debate in heuristics when the audience laughs at your opponent. So to have an interlocutor feel ridiculous should make them uncomfortable, and that might encourage them to begin to think. The problem with Socrates is that he never tries to make his interlocutor uncomfortable as such. He doesn't mention them being laughed at. If anyone is laughed at in a conversation, it's Socrates. And the most obvious example of this is in Hippias Major, where Socrates invents a person which we call nowadays the questioner, who behaves just like Hippias does. He's an heuristician, he laughs at his opponent, he gets the audience to laugh at his opponent, but Socrates is the opponent of the questioner, and Socrates explains how the questioner makes the audience laugh at him, Socrates. To be clear, at the moment Socrates isn't raising any internal contradictions in the boys, but he is explaining that ignorance is a bad thing, and if someone still has the ability to realize that ignorance is a bad thing, by being a person who is neither good nor bad, that person would then want to go to a good person, that is someone who doesn't have ignorance, in order to remove that ignorance. Just as a person who is neither healthy nor diseased would go to a doctor to remove a disease which he happens to have, but which hasn't taken control of his body yet. Socrates doesn't explain how one removes ignorance. I would suggest that education helps, but education isn't really the removal of ignorance, but the acquisition of knowledge. Socrates has also suggested that just as a bad person wouldn't philosophize, because a bad person no longer thinks that he doesn't know what he doesn't know. In other words, he thinks he does know what he doesn't know. In other words, he thinks that he knows, simply. You can't think that you know what you don't know. That wouldn't occur to you. You simply think that you know. And for that reason, the bad person wouldn't philosophize. So just as the bad person wouldn't philosophize, so too the good person wouldn't philosophize, because they already know. This, first of all, is not true, because nobody reaches the ultimate end of understanding. There's always something to learn, something to think about. But if we do take this at face value, Socrates is suggesting here, at least, that philosophizing is to do with acquiring knowledge, since it is about removing ignorance. We have to be careful here, especially since this entire argument is fallacious. We need to be exact. The person is neither good nor bad. Bad is ignorance. Good would, in that case, be Sophia, wisdom, expertise. And the person who is neither good nor bad has neither expertise nor ignorance, and yet is aware that there is ignorance in him. And for that reason, he would go to a sophos, an expert, who would help him remove that ignorance. But that is not the same as acquiring expertise. The activity of the person who is neither good nor bad is to philosophize. To philosophize is something not done by the sophoi or the ignorant. And philosophizing is done not to acquire Sophia, but to remove ignorance.